Alrighty, it is a Monday. It is a kind of cloudy day out there after a weekend that was full of raindrops and clouds and below average temperatures. Highs on Saturday just in the 50s. Yesterday, Sunday, we had temperatures in the low 60s. It's going to warm this whole week. So we got no rain in the forecast. I'm going to show you that in the latest model. I wanted to show you this first because it gets a lot of attention in my world. I've been brewing beer for a long time, like 15 years at least. This is my setup in the backyard. Used to do it in the house, but you can see that didn't last long. Pam was like, "That's not happening, dude." So I did that for a few years in the house. In the house, it was a mess. So I took everything outside a few years back, and this was it. And people go, "Hey, what's the connection with beer and weather?" And there's this huge, huge connection between beer and weather. Fermenting is what the yeast do when they're eating the sugars, and there's different kinds of yeast, and different kinds of yeast are active or eat the sugars and produce CO2 and alcohol at certain temperatures. So in this case, before Prohibition, a place like San Francisco, Half Moon Bay, there were brew houses everywhere. Everybody made beer because you didn't need air conditioning to cool the yeast, because the ale yeast ferment at about 58 degrees. And consequently, the sea surface temperatures are about 58 degrees. The air temperature is about 58 degrees right at the coast. Perfect place to brew ales. And to illustrate this point, if you wanted to make a lager, you need much colder temperatures, right? Lower temperatures. And that's why Milwaukee, right? Because you could have lager yeast. I think lager yeast ferments at like 45 degrees or something, which would be hard to do if you didn't have air conditioning. And a lot of this beer making occurred before the advent of air conditioning. And there's all sorts of stories about Prohibition and how when that came in, the beer, you know how lagers got so big? Like they shut down, right? Prohibition, you shut down 60 brew houses in San Francisco or brew facilities. Probably, I don't even know how many thousands across the country. And the only ones that could survive were the big ones like Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser guys. There's a couple other names too, Schlitz. Those guys started making, with the grains and whatever, they started making malted milk. That's where malted milk came from. I don't know if it's where it came from, but malted milk was a thing. You remember when you were a little kid, you remember going to the Giants games and getting malted milks. So when Prohibition ends, the only brew houses left are people who make lagers, Budweiser, right? And so Schlitz and all those, I can't remember all the different middle of the country beers. And it's only after, I think it was Jimmy Carter signed into law the ability to make beer again. And that's when Grossman and those guys up in Chico started making pale ales. The people down in Anchor Steam started making beer as well. So long history. Also, the thing that's interesting about beer is they trace it all the way back to the beginning of mankind, to the Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, because you would go grains, right? And all of a sudden that settled people down. That changed the nomadic life into a more of a city life. You would sit down, you'd grow, you'd have to harvest, you'd stay in one place. Well, when you make grain, if it rains one day and the grains are sitting in the water for a while, and then it warms up the next day, and it starts to warm, and the sugars start to come out, and then wild yeast impact that, and beer was being made naturally. And when they figured that out, a lot of folks believe, and I've read this a million places, is that civilization kind of revolved around obviously agriculture, but the ability to make beer. The other thing with beer, God, I got so many weird beer facts. The thing that was money about beer was if you were traveling and you did have to go out on a hunting party, you would take beer, right? Because of the alcohol, you could drink it, which is good, but also because you didn't have to worry about getting water that was infected or tainted. It make you sick and die. Back then you die. So they would take beer on these journeys. So a lot of history on beer. But anyway, this is my 15-gallon boil pot. It takes 20 gallons of beer to make 10 gallons of beer. It takes 20 gallons of water to make 10 gallons of beer. And I just recently got onto this water quest where I started traveling to get water. Like I go up to the Pitt River fly fishing, and then I grab 20 gallons of water, bring it home and brew with that. Same recipe that you'll see at the end of this deal, but I would brew with it. I brew with a rain. I took an atmospheric river rain 2 years ago during the pandemic, and I took 20 gallons of atmospheric water from the first atmospheric river of January in 2021 and made a beer out of it. It was awesome. The water is everything in beer. So that gallon pot, 20 gallons of water to make 10 gallons of beer. That is the conical fermenter. That is how I keep the temperature and the yeast happy. I make IPAs or ales, and they require about 58-degree fermenting temperature. I like to stay, sometimes it's fun to stay around 55. They sometimes do a better job, but you move the temperature around and you'll see the yeast reacting. So that's the conical, and that keeps things temperatures ready. That's important stuff that goes with the conical. This is the mash tun. That's the grains that you throw in there, 30 gallons of 2-row barley. You see at the end. You put it in hot water or warm water, 150 degrees. You let it sit for a couple hours, hour and a half. And then you take that, that's the wort, and there's the wort there. Let's see if you can see it. Yeah. Can you see it? That's the wort. And then you put that into the boil pot. So this is the profile of the beer. If you know much about beer, the gravity, the original gravity is 1.18. That's pretty big beer. Bitterness, the IBUs, International Bittering Units, that's pretty big as well. This would be almost akin to like a Sierra Nevada atomic ale or IPA. And then this is the grain list, the hops, and I actually do some light dry extract too, just to add to the punch. And then I do a lot of citra hops because I really, really like the citra hops, and Magnum to bitter. And then you can see this is the quarantine IPA. I'll move this out of the way. You can see my little logo there. So beer is a fascinating thing. And let's see if I can get out of here. I get out of here and I'll go here. And then we're back to weather, just like that. So beer is an amazing thing in that it does have a lot of history, and just not just in the world, but on the West Coast. So we can talk more about that later. Drew a box around something I want you to see. This is the weather for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but this is what the model thinks. I want you to see this high pressure ridge set up. So if we go, let me go back here, and then we'll go here. See where we are? You look for the blues and the greens. That's rain. Nothing. Here we are into Saturday. Here we are into the following week, the following Friday, following Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We're into April 30th. Little clip there, and then that's it. So somewhere around May 1st, we're looking pretty darn dry, which is just, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but that's a long run of dry weather. So it's going to be spring-like. We're going to see the pollen counts increase. We're going to see, fog returning to the coast, which we're seeing today, and more of this. This is how it looks right now, and you can see clearly that the clouds are clearing off. Out at Ocean Beach, this is right now. You're probably not watching this live, but if you were, swell's actually, it's pretty good. The surf is right now. I think it'll load. It might not. There it loads. It's pretty good right now for this time of year. This time of year, everybody puts it down generally, the surf, because the winds start coming on shore. But you can see there's actually a fellow out there. It's hard to see if you follow my pointer. There's a guy in the water there. But not much going on surf-wise. And then back to us here. So little beer, little weather, and very little weather, because it's going to be really nice next few days. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. I will, when there's not a lot of weather to talk about, I'm going to try to talk about other things, because otherwise I showed you that long range model off the top, so you could go, oh yeah, just put her down. I'm not sweating it. And it's going to be subtle variations on that, but overall it looks dry for quite some time. All right, we'll see you back here.